Hello and welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast, a show where I speak with the thinkers and creators that live at the crossroads of popular culture and brand marketing, helping you understand how popular culture works and how to better utilize it to make content that, actually matters. In 2018, anime, or Japanese animation, was a 20 billion with a B dollar industry. And a few months ago, we saw Sony pick up anime streaming service Crunchyroll for $1.2 billion. Anime and manga have been around since like the 70s, and the style and the aesthetic has embedded itself directly into popular culture here in the West, creating an impressively passionate and unique fandom. I'm Joe Cox, the Pop Marketer, and today we're going to be talking with David Ramirez, founding member and current Executive Director of Marketing and Communications for San Japan, a 20,000 attendee fan-run anime and gaming convention held in San Antonio, Texas since 2007. David is warm, knowledgeable, and an incredible ambassador for the welcomingly diverse and deep community of anime fandom in the U.S. It's a very smart and insight-packed chat, so no matter if you're an anime noob or a diehard otaku, without any more further ado, David Ramirez with San Japan talking anime fandom in the U.S. Let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Cox, and like every episode, we are talking about the convergence of pop culture and brand marketing. And we talk to different people, whether it be marketers or whether it be academics or influencers inside of pop culture and marketing to kind of explore that and find out how you can make your content, your brand work, and life in generally a little bit more enjoyable. And today I am extremely excited because my guest, I think we met, David, it was at a conference that I did last year that I was speaking at, and you introduced yourself and then told me kind of what you did. And I immediately was like, oh man, you were going to be on the show. So I have with us the executive director at San Japan, which we're going to be learning about a little bit more, David Ramirez. David, how are you today?
I am fantastic. Yeah, we met and I was just like, hey, I want to be friends with that guy. Like, he's the one. Not in a creepy way, but in like a friendly way. So let the record state. FBI, if you're listening, it was a nice way, I swear.
Oh, no, it's 100%. It's my favorite part of getting out and speaking about that because it allows me to meet people like you and in places that you wouldn't normally think, right? A business marketing conference. And if I'm lucky, out of each one, I get one or two people like you, David, where I'm like, oh, sweet, like these are my people. And this idea is not just, it's something that resonates, right? And I really was excited to have you on the show because one thing I wanted to focus the 2021 podcast on is to help introduce marketers to different, flavors of fandoms, right? One, to better understand fan culture ecosystem. So to understand what fan culture is in general and to better understand how deep, which I think a lot of people don't understand how deep not only all of fandom is, but each specific fandom, and then help explore specific fandoms and fan communities to better realize the marketing opportunities, right, that are out there to get a clear picture of how to create better partnerships with these large and super passionate, audiences. And so today we're going to dig into anime or, works of animation originating from Japan, but also kind of like an aesthetic and a style and all kinds of stuff. But importantly, the anime fandom and who better to be joining us and to talk about the anime fandom than you, David. And David is not only the UGC evangelist and marketer over at Tint, but also the executive director at San Japan, which I think is like bringing in when it's not global pandemic, it's bringing in, is it up to like 20,000?
Yeah, when it's not the apocalypse, we have about 20,000 people showing up at the downtown San Antonio Riverwalk. And so it's great because there's no other shows happening on Labor Day weekend. So we truly take over downtown San Antonio in the best way possible. And you will be walking down the river, you'll be walking in front of the Alamo or the Tower of the Americas. And there are just nerds and weebs and people in costumes and people geeking out the entire weekend. So we have become kind of a pillar on Labor Day. If you don't have family stuff to do, if you don't have other things to do, come down to the Riverwalk and nerd out because there's room for everyone.
Riverwalk's such a great spot for that. Like that's a really good visual of like the cosplay and the Riverwalk. And yeah, I'm gonna have to make it out there. So I'm gonna start out with this. Let's just get it through. What's San Japan and what happens every year out at the Riverwalk?
Yeah, so San Japan is the San Antonio Japanese Culture and Anime Convention. And for about 3.5 days, we take over the convention center and a couple of adjacent hotels. And we celebrate anime, digital fandoms, East Asian fandoms with a variety of activities. And so I think it's important to know an anime convention compared to, say, like a Comic Con or a Horror Con. Typically, anime conventions are 24-hour shows. And so you can technically start at San Japan at 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday and then run 24 hours all the way till Sunday at 6 p.m. And there's always something happening. So during the daylight hours, we'll have the more traditional trade showy activations like exhibitor halls and panels and booths and activities. In the evening, we have some more, shall we say, adult oriented programming with everything from a Rocky Horror Picture Show, reinterpreted as anime, to a burlesque show, to us taking over one of the largest ballrooms in San Antonio and turning it into Club San Japan for an all night rave, 2 of the nights of the show. So really, this is just us nerding out, celebrating, and getting all of our craziness out over the course of one weekend in San Antonio.
How long's it been going on?
So we had a couple of false starts. We had our market test in 2007, and this is when we were all a lot younger. I don't know if are watching on video right now, listener, but there's a lot of gray in this beard that was not there when I started San Japan. So we were all teenagers and said, "Hey, we're going to try out this thing." We took over our student union at our university here in San Antonio. We're like, "Okay, a couple hundred people might show up, and it'll be great." 850 people showed up and it was amazing and horrifying at the same time. So we're like, all right, let's do this. This market can support it. So we moved to a municipal auditorium downtown, and then every 2 years we had to move venues because we just kept growing and growing and growing. And then, like we said, last year, well, year before last, not 2020, we hit 20,000 attendees.
Well, congratulations. That's insane that you've been there from 850. That seems to be, uh, you know, one of the fun parts is watching those conferences kind of grow. And I'm going to guess that San Japan isn't the only anime conference in the country or the world. Is that right? That I would is how many of them are there, or in general, is there others over the country of note, or in the world of note?
Yeah, there are literally thousands of anime and fan events focused on anime and East Asian culture throughout the world. There's actually a trade organization of anime conventions of which I'm a member. So it's called RAC, which is We Run Anime Cons. Not the most creative acronym, but a really fantastic group of people. And, it's fantastic because there's no lack of knowledge and sharing because all of us really kind of stick to our cities. And so for a while, I was supporting a show in Milwaukee, Anime Milwaukee, that has about 11,000 attendees. The big shows are going to be Anime Expo in Los Angeles, that has about 100,000 attendees over the course of 5 days. And then you have stuff like Anime Boston, Anime New York, Anime Central, which is in Chicago and Indiana. So there's lots of conferences, really any city, all the way from San Antonio to Albuquerque to Cucamonga. And there's actually one in Cucamonga. Uh, who knew that Rancho Cucamonga would have an anime con? Everyone has some sort of anime event, and so that's what I love about this is because the culture is so broad, and they really do localize it. So when you go to a show in San Antonio, it feels like you're at a show in San Antonio compared to one in Boston, compared to one in Baltimore, compared to one in South Florida, because it's a swamp and there's an anime con in a swamp. And you couldn't pay me to go to South Florida, but that's a separate conversation. So it's really taking this broad appeal of anime and East Asian culture and then localizing it to your community and connecting to your community in really, really unique ways.
let's talk about anime. Let's talk about, especially for someone listening that understands a bit, has probably seen more than they think they have of anime, just because of, I guess, especially in my childhood, a lot of the things that were ported over that we had no idea as kids that were coming from Japan. But what is anime, and could you talk a little bit about anime in general and kind of the place it fits in overall fandom?
Sure. So, anime is a very unique style of animation and art that originated in Japan. We really start seeing it going mainstream in Japan and then coming stateside very shortly after in the 1950s and 60s with a very popular title called Astro Boy. You flash forward a little bit, and there are lots of folks that I think their earliest experience with anime was probably Speed Racer and the notoriously bad dubs and the flaps, the lips moving that don't actually catch up with the words. And then you go forward just a little bit more when Star Wars was debuting in the United States in 1977. That kind of opened the door for all of these space and mecha and kind of Star Wars esque anime to enter. And so that's where we start seeing things like Macross and Gundam start to come into the conversation. And so really, anime is inspired not just by the things happening in Japan, but also back and forth between American pop culture and Japanese pop culture. So flash forward to a little bit into probably where you and I were exposed to anime is there were things on Toonami, on the now defunct Tech TV, that were showing kind of unique and specialized anime titles, things that were a little bit more adult, a little more horror, a little more romance, a little bit more science fiction and fantasy. And then now anime is everywhere. You can watch it on Saturday morning cartoons. It's influenced American cartoons in significant ways when you watch shows like Chowder or Steven Universe or Teen Titans. A lot of the tropes, a lot of the styles, a lot of the perspectives have actually been taken from anime. And so anime has influenced not just East Asian culture and not just folks that enjoy and appreciate East Asian culture, but American animation, American cartoons, and even the way that we frame certain things. There's lots of tropes that you just don't realize originated in animation or in anime.
I'm thinking that you've gotten that question before, because that was an expertly done timeline slash what is anime and really where does it fit into pop culture. Because now that you say that, it's woven itself into like an aesthetic, right? It's like it's woven itself so much into culture. We don't even know a lot of times where certain parts of it came from that actually kind of get its roots there, which could be an entire talk on its own that we will have to have sometime. But I really want to, I want to move forward with understanding kind of not only what anime is now that we're grounded in that, but how we get to the fandom in general and conferences. But first, how did you get involved in anime? Where did you? Because it feels like somebody who's dedicated this much time and passion and sweat and blood, I'm sure, into this conference. Was it something that came from childhood, or where did you first get exposed?
Yeah, so I'm originally from far west Texas, very Hispanic, very, very close knit community. And I had a couple of uncles that were very influential on me growing up. And thankfully, they're still with us. So I don't want to make it sound like they're dead and gone. So one of them was stationed abroad in Okinawa. And so he came back from his time in the Navy. And he's like, hey, I want to show Davey some of these interesting cartoons that I saw abroad. And so he came back with a strong passion for anime. And my other uncle, Lawrence, went to college somewhere outside of Texas and came back like, oh, there was an entire club of people watching these bootleg VHSs in the basement of the library at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so both of those uncles kind of exposed me to things like, uh, let's say, Princess Mononoke and some of the early Miyazaki movies, which are just so beautifully compelling and which have now been licensed by Disney. So, again, affecting the way that not just East Asian animation is working, but also the way that Disney animation is working. And then from there, just met other nerds in high school that wanted to hang out and talk about these weird cartoons and stay up late and watch Toonami. Got to college and found out there was a whole lot more of us out there than I thought could ever be possible. And yeah, I hate to say it, I'm the most casual anime watcher in my friend group, which means I usually only have about 12 to 15 animes going simultaneously, which sounds horrific to some folks, but I don't watch sports. So the way that someone would watch, say, the Dallas Cowboys, that's the way that we watch anime. That's the way that we consume it, and it really is, like you said, truly a fandom because it's all about consumption and absorption and connection to these series and these titles and these creators, even more than that.
Great. I've heard this before and I've said it before. So I'm going to check with you because you're the one to tell me. Is it true that Western culture, or especially Hollywood, in a certain history timeline, we went more special effects and real film, TV, the things that we made was more focused on special effects, and Japanese culture, instead of spending the money towards that special effects, went more to, hey, we can make anything happen if we draw it. Animation allows anything to happen. So for me, I just remember being drawn to anime so much just because of the scale. I'd never seen the scale of certain things, of how a environment looked, or whether it be explosions or mechs or whatever it is. It almost felt like everything and anything was possible. Is there truth behind that in the history?
Yeah, I think there's a degree of truth to it. I think it's good to know that stateside is where a lot of the technology that makes special effects possible was developed. Right? You think about Industrial Light and Magic (ILM) and LucasArts, really innovating with Star Wars, and the folks at Pixar really innovating with the way that CGI is happening. And so on the Japanese side, a lot of it was, like you said, okay, we can't necessarily do that with the technology. I'm thinking of the Godzilla movies where it was a guy in a rubber suit knocking down painted buildings that are just cardboard boxes, and you can occasionally see a boom mic in the same shot. And so instead of worrying about that, instead of having to build out these elaborate sets, you can do all of that with animation. And it's so much more possible. And I think even more so than that, the Japanese recognized early on that there's a lot of niches out there. Because in America, it's usually like the white knight that's going to come in and save the damsel in distress and do the thing. That's sort of the Western ideal of a hero. But when you look at Japanese animation, it's all about the other, right? It doesn't matter if you're in a wheelchair. It doesn't matter if you're LGBT. It doesn't matter if you're purple or if you have 5 arms. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. Like, you too can be the hero. You too can find love. You too can pilot the mech, or defeat the monster, or save the princess or the prince, or become the princess. Like, you can do all these things. And so I think that's still part of the appeal of it, is when you look at all the anime coming out of Japan and the stuff that really resonates stateside, it's stuff that we don't have stateside. I'm thinking, like, there's a lot of sports anime coming out, and who would think that one of the most popular anime would be just watching animated people playing basketball or figure skating or swimming, and kind of the drama and dynamic behind that. And I think even more so, they've mastered just the hook to get people to pay attention. One of the longest running anime series is called One Piece. It's about a bunch of pirates that go around the world and are trying to collect these epic treasure. And they're just about to hit 900 episodes. And when you imagine, okay, 900 episodes, 20 to 25 minutes a pop, like, how many minutes is that, right? How many hours is that? How many days and weeks is that? And so to truly be a One Piece fan, it's such a commitment. It's a commitment to the fandom. It's a commitment to that sort of consumption. And when you think about that stateside, you might get some of that with the Buffys and the Whedonverse, right? You might get some of that with Star Trek and Star Wars, but short of like true nerd fandoms and then maybe the athletic fan community, like, you're not going to find someone that's going to watch 172 hours of XYZ show and say, okay, what do you mean it's over now? They only hit 900 episodes, right? And so that's just something very different, dynamic about just the way that anime is approached, engaged with, consumed.
There's something so cool about discovering something. It's always one of my favorite. It's My life is two things. It's the fear of I'm going to run out of things to find, which hasn't happened and won't. I've found out at my in recent times, and it is the joy of finding something new that I find out is really deep, right? Like something like a new IP or a new story or new characters. And I find out, oh my God, there is 900 episodes, right? Like, it's just the depth of the characters and whatever. And I think there's nothing better than that kind of discovery. The only thing even close would be what Doctor Who on the British side of it on shows. I don't know exactly what episodes they're up to, but I don't know of much. I mean, you could say Simpsons, but it's not a story. It's episodes, and not necessarily something that takes you to different places each season.
And I think even more so, they that's the core product or the core thing that they're putting out. That doesn't include all the movies. That doesn't include all the video games. That doesn't include all the ancillary accoutrement that come with that specific fandom. And people don't just watch one anime, right? They watch several. Or like I said, I'm a casual watcher in my community, and I'm watching at least a dozen right now, and not just watching, which is great and it's fantastic. There's all these streaming services that you can legally watch it on now, right? We're not in bootleg VHS land anymore, but they also merchandise. I think the best case study in anime merchandising is Hello Kitty, because people forget that Hello Kitty is Japanese IP, that it's an anime and it's a comic book. You can go to any Walmart or any big box mart and they have Hello Kitty birthday cakes, they have Hello Kitty piñatas, they have Hello Kitty, everything. And the little 3 or 4 year old child that's thinking about that's not like, oh, that's a Japanese show. It's like, no, it's Hello Kitty, full stop, right? And just being able to do that and to sell so much merchandise and sell so much stuff with just the IP behind it is just a fantastic business study.
You bring up a great point, and I think something that I really wanted to cover in the core of this, especially as we study more about and talk more about fandom. It is, how the internet has turned it from something that we consume, and it's turned it to hyper consumption only type of pastime, to something that actually now you are participating with. And some creators even would go to as far as work together with fandoms to create that. So the picture is, and when marketers or anybody looks at fandom, it is not just, to your point, the stuff that is the content, the core content that is created around that IP, right? Or that show. It is not only the merchandising. It is, which is makes it even bigger. I mean, Star Wars, right? Like that's like the story. It is all of the conversations that happen every single day, and every a string of fan conversations. It is all the fan made versions, right? Like fan movies, fan books, fan things that are not part of that, which helps people really make it a part of their identity, right? Like, which really helps. It's a different, I think, fandom than it may have been when we were growing up, right? Because I didn't know it was kind of a one-way street. Could you talk a little bit about the anime fandom and that community? How large is it, and what is it like to be, somebody as not only a part of it, but somebody who helps shape it?
I don't think there's a solid number for how many fans there are of anime, because I think there's so many people that casually watch it or have stopped watching it or do it sort of incidentally. I think the fandom community within anime, or the anime and East Asian animation folks, is a lot more open than some of your other fandoms. There's a lot less gatekeeping. And again, I think that goes back to the idea of anyone can be the hero, anyone can be the villain, right? You may have this really cute Japanese schoolgirl that's actually the ultimate evil of her world. And that's, and again, becoming a common trope. So when you look at the anime fandoms, you can walk up to someone and say, hey, who's your favorite character? And they will probably bore you to death. And I'm a huge fan, so I want to be bored to death by them saying XYZ person is my favorite and this is why. And they have an entire doctoral thesis on why that's their favorite character and why that's the thing to do. And that's, I think, very standard for the sort of depth of engagement for the hardcore fans. For the casual fans, I think they're not as casual as they think they are, because invariably someone will say, I'm casual, and then their entire house is filled with anime statues. I'd like to think I'm not that's hardcore, generally speaking, other than organizing. But then even looking on camera right now, I'm like, oh, there's a Totoro right there. There's this up there. There's that, things off camera. The fandom itself is just, it's widespread. It's very deep. it tends to sway a little bit more towards the younger side of Gen X. It's very strongly millennial, and then Gen Z is kind of brought up in this place where anime is no longer a separate thing, right? Like they grew up with Steven Universe, they grew up with Chowder, and so that style is not separate from the American experience. It's inherently part of the American experience, and so they like to engage with it a little bit differently. The other thing about the anime fandoms is they're inherently digital, and it's really digital natives, right? Like they're the folks that are posting content and fan art on DeviantArt and on Tumblr. They're having these long conversations on Twitter. They're doing all these activations and all these hangouts on Twitch. So these folks in the anime fandom want to talk about anime. They want to engage with anime. They want to experience it constantly, and so they're constantly engaging with it on different social media. So if you are trying to connect with folks that are digital natives that love to create content, like those are the folks that you want to connect with because they will do it with or without your permission. I think a great example is we had to cancel San Japan last year because of the pandemic, which is horrible, but luckily a con of a certain size, we get to have a war chest and we can keep doing it. So we'll have it again this year in 2021. And our attendees came to us and they said, we want to build the convention center and the entire convention in Minecraft. And, me as a business person, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, how can we help? What can I do? Do you need money? I have a little bit of money I can throw at you. And they're like, no, I just want the assets. Give me the assets, give me permission, and then help me plug it every once in a while when I need something. I'm like, well, I have cash, I have people, I have like what can I do to enable this? And they're like, no, this is our initiative. We just need you to say it's okay to do. And I think that's so very common in fandom is the folks will say, I want to create this fan art, I want to create this video game, I want to create this content experience, and I just need permission from the publishing house. I just need permission from the localizer. I just need permission to say go. And that can be really scary, I think, to American companies and American brands because you're essentially saying, yeah, go run and play with my IP. And that's horrifying, but you know what? We found with anime, we found with brands that connect with anime, that's the way to do it because if you give them permission, if you say yes, if you give them a little bit of support and just slight amount of guardrails, they will spend thousands of hours building your convention in Minecraft. They will host their own convention. They will give you all the assets for free. And all I had to do was say yes, give them some love and support along the way. And when they had a Facebook fundraiser, I threw a couple of bucks in the pot. And that's all that they ever asked. So, yeah, the anime fandom, they're weird. We're weird. We're interesting, but it's such a strong passion. And I hope that brands out there can recognize that this is the place you need to be connecting with people. This is the place you need to be to getting in touch with those folks.
Absolutely. You said something that really resonated, and it is that for a lot of Western companies, it can be scary. I think that was probably put down. Disney led the way, and it wasn't 10 years ago. I mean, especially 20 years ago, that if you used a mouse in anything, there was a lawyer going to be knocking on your door. And the same goes, I get it asked all the time, whether I was in social media, working with brands and marketing, or talking about pop culture and marketing, is what do we do about the legal ramifications of utilizing different IP or showing that? And I don't want to get into it. It gets really mucky real fast, and it matters like how much risk do you want, and are you asking the right permissions a lot of times. But talk a little bit about, is the Japanese anime culture and fandom, has it always been a little bit more open with their fans being able to kind of utilize that IP more so than in the West?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's been more open. I think part of it has been there are enforcement difficulties to leap the Pacific. And so when you see enforcement actually happen stateside, especially like now, it's by the localizer. So here in Texas, we have two of the biggest anime localizers. We have Funimation in Dallas, and we have Sentai in Houston. And so San Antonio is right in the middle of that little V. So we're in a good place to have anime because we can get it from a bunch of different directions. And so usually what will actually happen is at an anime convention during Artist Alley setup, we will have an attorney from Funimation and Sentai walk the anime Artist Alley floor, and they'll be like, yeah, this is kosher because that's technically fan art, and we're going to say that's fair use. And this stuff looks like you traced it off of a screen cap, so we're going to probably say this stuff is not cool. Not to say that, well, number one, I don't speak for Funimation and Sentai, so any of my colleagues over there, please don't send me nasty text messages. But there are some companies that do, practice the Disney version of IP enforcement. With companies like, let's say, Square Enix, which produces Final Fantasy, which is a very popular video game series and anime series and just content series. There's so much stuff that Square Enix makes. They are notoriously strict with the way that they enforce. And part of that is because they have a very strong connection stateside with their Japanese parent company. So even though there's a Square Enix of America, um, they don't want to see their stuff used in a lot of fan art. They don't want to see their sprites used in things. So I wouldn't say that it's any more or less judicious or any more or less open with the way that people use IP. I just think the savvier, smaller localizing companies have figured out like this is the way that you can amplify your message, right? And you don't have to spend a lot of money on Facebook ads. You don't have to spend a lot of money on getting it out there because the people will become your number one advocates. And a marketer can scream until they're blue in the face that their IP or their product is amazing. But if you can get one person who is outside the company who just appreciates their product or service with all their heart to say, this is the best thing ever, and this is why you should do the thing, like that is worth $1 million. That is worth everything, right? That's the user generated content story. That's the story of true and authentic marketing.
I just found my clip for this show, by the way. That is it's so extremely everything that is what we are doing, and the kind of things that I want brands and marketers to be able to understand, like the impact of allowing a fan to be a fan, right, and to give up that control a little bit, in the right environment. Yeah, that was incredible. By the way, that was great. I'm almost shedding a tear. And I love the idea of a lawyer going through and bringing that in and saying, "Yep, traced." Like that's not comfort. That's not kosher. It's not good. But this over here is, on the floor itself, right? And it not only it makes a better environment for sponsors, but a better environment for the fans in general of what kind of content they're getting. It's funny when you mention Square Enix because who partnered with Square Enix? It's Kingdom Hearts is strangely enough, the meeting of the East and the West for that amazingly little odd fandom of its own, right? But I didn't think about them both being very protective of their IPs together, and it's a lot because of the creators themselves and how much they want the control over those stories and those characters. So it's
Well, and I think bringing in the lawyer like that and having a fandom community that's so woke and aware to intellectual property law. I think when you look like, let's say, sports fandom, which I like to poop on them just because you know I was pooped on them as a kid, and now like the nerds are in charge now. Um,
hurrah.
uh, yeah, like the average sports fan is probably not going to know about like IP enforcement for the NFL. But I hate to say it, the average like anime and like major fan or big fan is going to know like, oh, these are the way that IP works, and this is why this is being localized this way, and this is why you shouldn't be streaming it this way. Like they care that they're buying the authentic product. They want to stream the content from a legitimate source that they're paying for, that has the legal rights to stream it from. They want to buy from vendors that have permission to license and sell that merchandise. They don't want to buy bootlegs. And I've seen them go as far as to like burn down people's Facebook and Yelp pages when they find out that XYZ shop is selling bootlegs. And so, again, why would you want to silence that person when they're essentially out in the universe enforcing your IP for you? When they say, like, oh, that bag is fake, why did you buy that? You should actually buy the real bag from the actual company. So they're celebrating your brand, they're celebrating your IP, and they're enforcing it to a certain degree and self policing it. So, anime fandom, like I said, we're weird, we're out there, we watch a lot of funky stuff, but we truly love our content. We love the things that people are putting out, and we're going to be your biggest fans forever if you work with
Yeah,
us.
as brands and marketers, we have to really understand that our fandoms are not the masses, right? It's not, hey, they just don't know how business works. That's not true. And I feel the next generation coming up is even more so, to your point. It's just the fact that your fandom understands, or the people that are fans of your IP understand that the way you make money and the way they get more of the things that they love is through, and how that works, right? Like, is through making sure to police those things, or even going as far as policing what's bootleg versus not, and where that money is going is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I was doing comms and press management for a show in Milwaukee. And so, first, let me say Milwaukee in February, like, you would never think that you could get a group of anyone together. I went there a couple years back to do this show. It's Anime Milwaukee. They have about 10, 11,000 people. And it was a couple of days after the polar vortex, right? And so this is where if you're outside and you're caught in the vortex, you have like 15 minutes before you just die. It's like the day after tomorrow, right? It's that cold up there. And the Milwaukee Convention Center is on the lake, right? So it's even more frigid. It's just, why would anyone want to live? I live in the South for a reason, right? Because I can't deal with any of that stuff. I don't know how they got me to book this show. And yet they can still get 11,000 people in the dead of winter when there's snow outside to gather to celebrate anime and fandom. And not just that, remember, anime cons happen over 24 hours. So they show up Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, and they're at that convention all the way till Sunday in the dead of winter. And to be fair, I don't know what else you're going to be doing in Milwaukee in February, like when it's negative 183 degrees outside. But like, that's just the devotion of these people. And I have this very fond memory of these poor cosplayers like trudging through the snow because they were in these really kind of bulky Gundam costumes. And they were committed to getting to that
Right.
front door. And I'm like, okay, if I'm mildly inconvenienced, I won't even go inside the Starbucks. But these people are wearing 50 pounds of costumes. It is snowing. It is below freezing outside. And they are trudging from this cheap parking lot 3 blocks away to go to the show to celebrate their fandom. And at that show, someone made the comment to me, which it just, I don't know, it always kind of resonated with me. Oh, this show is really, really good. If we can get enough people to watch it, they'll get more money, and then the animation will get better. And so again, that sort of meta awareness that like, oh, the show is produced on the cheap, and so we need to get people to get behind it so that it has more money. And that wasn't a call to action from the company, like that wasn't something from the Japanese production team. That was just like, oh, we know this is the way anime works. We know this is what we have to do to make sure that this show stays on the air, to make sure that this event in Milwaukee keeps on happening, to make sure that this fandom has some sort of degree of continuity. And again, that meta awareness is just bizarre as a marketer, but it's fantastic to watch and see in action.
It is bizarre. It's especially bizarre when we're thinking of, a lot of the brands that we work with on every day that people just don't have that kind of love, right? Like, they don't have that kind of love for the tissue papers they have. Like, we want to understand the context that they have in our lives, but they just don't. It's hard to resonate that kind of identity from most products that are around here. I say that, but most products around here are like the products in your office, which are like, totems of my fandom of other things. So let's talk before you have to take off. I really want to talk, and I think it's a perfect segue on just the opportunity for marketers, right? Not just marketers that create anime and or even on the sides of anime or adjacent to anime, but brands that you and I know of, consumer brands, whatever that may be. What kind of opportunity do you see, if any, for those brands to get in front of this audience?
Yeah, so I think it's important to start with uh, letting people know that the anime industry globally it's supposed to approach about 25 billion this year.
Right.
And so last year we got to see, I know you and I were chatting about it in December, that Funimation and Crunchyroll and Sony, there was this big acquisition that happened, and the price tag was in the billions,
Yeah.
which is nuts. And I had a lot of people say, how can they spend that much money? Where's the justification? It's like, okay, the global anime industry in 2020 alone was 25 billion. And there are estimations currently, I think it's from Forrester, that's saying like between 7 and 10% rate of growth year over year from now to 2025. And when you look at anime conventions across the nation during the worst part of the recession, under the Obama administration, during the worst part of the pandemic, during the worst part of everything, those shows continued to grow. They were insulated by it because of the degree of the fandom and the depth and the passion of the fandom. So if you're looking to make an investment in an industry that is slated to grow, is obviously growing, has huge impacts. Sometimes the powers that be need those big number justifications, and so that's your big number. It's a $25 billion industry, and the fact that it just got acquired by Sony, or Crunchyroll just got acquired by Sony, means that it's going to be even bigger. So coming down the line from that, I think looking a little bit more micro instead of macro, anime conventions are so representative of their community. When we talk about, let's say, Anime Milwaukee in Milwaukee, the people there are students at UWM. They are people that work in Milwaukee. They're people that live in Green Bay or do cheese making in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, not Sheboygan, Michigan, because I found out those are two very different places, and never mix them up because they will stab you. Um, right, but like it's such a local show, and it's very meaningful when someone makes an appearance there, whether it be a brand or a company or an experiential pop-up, and people will remember that for a long time. At San Japan, we were a stop for the summer of Coca-Cola promotion. I think it was in 2017, 2018. They did this big road show, and people are still talking about it. They were just so excited that Coca-Cola wanted to spend an entire weekend with these nerds. It's not enough just to pay to be in the program book. It's not enough just to pay to be, an interstitial ad on the website or to drop in a couple of ads in the streaming service. Anime fans are all about the long haul, right? We talked about One Piece and it being 900 episodes long. You have to be able to commit to it for a long period of time. You have to be able to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and they want it to be experiential. The summer of Coca-Cola, they were giving out Cokes, they had swag, they had things to do, and it was a lot of fun. We also recently hosted an insurance company, which I will not name drop because they didn't pay enough in their sponsor pack to get a name drop on a podcast. But I when they came to me, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's going to be XYZ insurance company, whatever. People were pumped that they were there. I'm like, really? And they were giving out backpacks, they were giving out swag, you could spin a wheel. And, yes, we have insurance companies in our portfolio. My apologies to them if they hear this, but like, y'all are not the most fun people
Right.
to have at a convention where people are dressing up and acting silly. But people were excited to see them there because they paid for the big build out. They were present. The folks wore their ears. And then even in the hotel convention or the convention center hotels, right? The staff had T-shirts that said San Japan on them. They were wearing light up headbands. They were wearing stuff, and so they were really part of the experience, not standing outside of it and observing. So if you're gonna participate with the anime fandom, if you're gonna engage with it, jump in with both feet. Don't hesitate. Really buy into it, and know that if you do that, the fans will be there for you. And I think one of the other things to know is be prepared for the rush if you actually do resonate with them. There's a restaurant chain called Dick's Last Resort. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And it's in lots. It's a tourist chain. It's owned usually by like Landry's or Rainforest Cafe. And you go there and people treat you badly and they make fun of you and write ugly things on hats. Which, if I wanted to do that, I would just go have dinner with my parents. I don't need to have them. Like, I don't need to have a waiter make fun of me while I eat. I can do that at home. So we did a partnership with them, and I think they really underestimated how much it was actually going to drag people down there. And so, like, we're having anime night. We're going to have anime on all the screens in the restaurant, and as part of it, you get a free appetizer. The shortest wait at the restaurant the entire weekend was about 2.5 hours. And it's a Riverwalk restaurant. It's easily like 150, 200 top place, right? There's 3 floors of this restaurant, and they could not bring in enough staff to keep it moving because people were so excited to go to anime night as part of San Japan. So be prepared for that. Make sure you have, and then people were unhappy about it on the tail end, which is a separate conversation because don't underestimate the anime community. Like, we're here, we're loud, we're obnoxious, and we're going to do all the things that we have to do to get it done. So connect, don't be afraid, jump in with both feet, and then be prepared for some awesome results. And you never know, from restaurants to XYZ insurance company, like, anime fans love that you're present.
Right. It seems like the bar is low, and I see that in a lot of fandom. It is that there's not used to necessarily the world from the outside. They're their world being interested in that, and there's actual excitement about, oh my gosh, since this brand is gonna, since Coke is coming here, for instance, that is meaning that, hey, our cult, it's growing, we're being heard, people understand why we're special, right? And I think you said it best when you got to it, in that why the anime group is different, and that is to do with the stories and the hero that isn't your, the heroes, your traditional hero's journey, or the knight, saving the princess and slaying the dragon. And I think the Western stories are catching up to that, but I think, again, it's a lot to do with what anime has brought to us in the past. And I think that the culture really speaks to a lot of the inclusivity, and the identification of different people around us, right? Like, understanding of different cultures, understanding of it, everything that makes up this awesome world. So, where are you most excited about, as we continue? As anime looks like it's never been bigger, as it's kind of like, okay, we've sold, Crunchyroll sold for over $1 billion, and it's about to even go more into this mainstream look. What are you most excited about of this evolution of not only the content, but also the culture?
Yeah, as an events person, as someone who runs an anime con, I think for me, it's seeing where the experiential is going to go. Um, Anime has a lot of adjacent fandoms, so K-pop, super hot, and kind of made its way into the world, or into the fandom community through anime conventions because they had nowhere else to go.
Oh,
And in the beginning with esports, before there were PAXs, before there were these gaming conventions, a lot of them would do gaming at anime cons and pop culture cons because they had game rooms that would be open 24 hours a day. So I'm curious to see like where all these adjacent fandoms affect the way that anime happens and how anime continues to grow. And there's this really magical moment, and I always do it with my coworkers at Tint at my day job, where I give them a couple of free tickets. And I want to be there when they walk into the big exhibitor hall because it's cool to see them in the hallways and they see all the costumes, and you can tell they're getting a little bit of like sensory overload.
yeah.
But the first moment that they walk into the exhibitor hall, and on the left there's an Itapara car show, which is this Japanese. It's loud, and that's actually Japanese for loud. And it's just these cars that have LEDs and speakers, and they're made up like anime characters. And on the right, there's an entire video game arcade. And in front of you, there's robots battling. And in the distance, you can see 500 or 600 artists selling posters and T-shirts and plushies. And just to see the look on their face of being overwhelmed and intrigued and inspired and slightly horrified, like it's the little bit of fear that makes it really special for me. um, like that's that special moment, and I can't wait for us to get back to in-person events to be able to give people that sense of awe that I really have only ever seen at places like Disneyland and Universal Studios. So can't make it to Disney, can't make it to Universal, check out your local anime con. And while it may not have the mouse or some of the big IP, I'm sure you're going to find something interesting, something cool, and really connect with the nerds that are in your community. And don't forget, all these nerds have a day job. All of these nerds, again, we're getting a little bit older. When I started with San Japan, I was a teenager with zero spending capacity, and now I'm a marketing manager at a SaaS product, right? Like a venture-backed SaaS product. So I have a lot more money to spend on my figurines and my toys and T-shirts. So anime fandom is just going to become more affluent. They're going to mature a lot more quickly. And, as Gen Alpha starts to replace Gen Z, Gen Alpha is turning 10 and 11 this year. It's my generation, the millennials, that are force feeding our children anime at whatever cost, right? Like we're just going to open them up. We're going to shove Ponyo and Totoro and as much anime as we can into them, and either they're going to love us or resent us. But we're influencing that next generation.
Um, you have been so the perfect person to not only represent San Japan, and they're very lucky to have you, but also to represent that anime fandom to a group, that is my listeners that maybe aren't as familiar. I definitely was there whenever you're walking me through the the conference, and there is something so magical about that it just, I don't know how it sparked. You were there seeing this thing grow, but from Kansas City, right, a Midwest town that had no exposure. I had no exposure as a kid. I loved to consume the content, but I had nobody to talk to about it, and also nowhere to take that and to see it kind of come to life, right? And conferences are insane. Kansas, I mean, the amount of growth and what you can see, and the kind of just the different parts of each conference, whether it be a comic book convention, anime convention, it really shows what happens when the nerds take control, and where we kind of put our time and our efforts and our money, and it's a beautiful thing. And we're so lucky to have you on the show, and thank you so much for spending your a bit of your afternoon talking with me about anime. I feel like I want to go and watch something now, but like you said, what to watch? Maybe I'll just start One Piece. Maybe I'll start episode 1 if that goes.
It's a commitment. And thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thanks for getting the good word out about pop culture, because people shouldn't be scared, right? Like pop culture and all these fandoms, we're all just nerds in different flavors. And, marketers, you got to listen up and do the thing.
It goes deep, you can't be you really can't. You can't see it as just things that you hit to knock money out of, right? That not good. You're not gonna get a good experience as a marketer working inside of, hey, we're just gonna throw you money and you're gonna really like our thing. But then again, this, that somebody who's really deep into the fandom, there's languages, there's stuff that is, to somebody or a marketer coming in, it can be a lot. But I don't think, from what you said, especially with anime and the openness of that culture, it's, hey, we don't expect you to know everything. We are pumped that you understand and identify us, right? Like that you see us. We don't need you to understand every single bit about it, but it's something that I think we're going to see some really great things in the future on. And I cannot wait to get out in person, if I can remember how to be around people again. And in the first place I'm going is the conference. When is the conference? This 2021.
Yeah, so San Japan is on Labor Day every year. So 2021, 22, 23, we're under contract through 25 at this point. So if you can't catch us on this coming Labor Day, or if you're just not ready to go back out into the world, it's okay. We're all a little bit social awkward in the anime fandom too, so we're not going to judge you too harshly. But yeah, catch us on Labor Day in downtown San Antonio.
Yeah, we didn't even get to talk cosplay or VTubers. Right? There's 100 things that you and I got to talk about. So I'd love to have you back on sometime soon.
Absolutely, anytime.
David, thanks so much. And thanks for everybody for listening to another episode of the Pop Marketing Podcast.